We went to Afghanistan because of a horrific attack that happened 20 years ago. That cannot explain why we should remain there in 2021. That it's time to end America's longest war. It's time for American troops to come home. U.S. troops, as well as forces deployed by our NATO allies and operational partners, will be out of Afghanistan before we mark the 20th anniversary of that heinous attack on September 11th.
August the 30th, 2021, was the deadline set by President Biden for the American military to withdraw from Afghanistan and end the 20-year occupation. 4 days before the deadline, on August the 26th, 2021, a bomb attack outside Kabul airport killed 13 American soldiers and 170 Afghan citizens. To attack the Islamic State in Khorasan, or ISIS-K, the organization behind the suicide bombing, the US carried out its last drone strike in Afghanistan before its retreat from the country.
Good hit.
رو منگا نو ډېرې ریدلي وو مغه ورځ مازدیګر تقریبا 5:30 بجې وې مازدیګر و چې دغلته زه ناسته وم ورسیسکه هغې ورسیسکه هلته ناسته وم ظرفونه مې مینځله چې یو ورې ګړمبس چې ګړمبس شو نور خاکباد چې دودونه شوله نور پوه نه شولو.
Zarmina's house stands just 20 meters from where the missile hit. The frightening experience still makes her anxious.
ډېر را دردونکې سانه ډېره خطرناکه وه په دې باندې سخت حالات تېر شه زړه حمله پرې راغلله مریضه شوله تر اوسه پورې هغه ده مور مې په حال نه راځي تر اوسه پورې هغه ده بېتابه ده اوس هم بېتابه ده.
The target of the strike was Zarmina's 43-year-old neighbor, Zamarai Ahmadi. The missile killed him and 9 others, including 7 children from his family. Farshad Haidan is Ahmadi's nephew. Today, he has come to the courtyard home where his uncle used to live.
آمدیم این موتر سوخته بود و تمام اینجا را خون گرفته بود. خیلی یک بوی خون بود در خانه. کل جای شیشه کلش تکه تکه شده بود. شیشه را خال نو انداختیم پس. 10 نفر از یا شهید شده. و دیگه بیخی دیگه با وضعیت ما اینجا خراب شد. باز از پشت یک چند دقیقه تیر شد جنازه را آوردن. جنازه را آوردن تنها اینمی 4 نفر ما دیدیم. دیگهشون تکه و تکه شده بودن تکه و پارچه شده بودن و را به ما نشان ندادن. تنها فیصل
دغه شهیدانو غوښې ماغزه همدغسې دي زموږ کور ته راباد شوي وه موږ پلاستیک په لاس کې ورو راواخیسته همداسې غوښې هم د بامو د سر نه د دې حویلۍ نه موږ د دې شهیدانو غوښې ماغزه په پلاستیک کې له خپل په لاس مې ماټول کړه د انسان ماغزه هغلته زموږ نرس که د سر پوستکی پروت و ویښته پورې نښتي وه چې څه خبره د کوم نارینه و د کوم ماشوم و.
Brandon Bryant, a whistleblower of the US drone program, served in the US Air Force from 2006 to 2011, where his main task was operating drones to carry out targeted killings.
Typically, all those missions start with human intelligence, right? We are told by someone directly operating on the ground, this is what's going on, whether they are actual force multiplier people, like on our own side, or locals who had decided to be informants for us. Right, and we track it, we see who's in charge, who comes here, and because we're also doing the mobile cell phone tower, every time someone is in that compound and uses their cell phone, we pick it up, and it marks it in the database that this person's here, this is what we're doing, and so now anytime that person leaves, we can be flying it over an area and pick up that cell phone number, and we can pinpoint their exact location.
این بم که خورد موتر در گرفت. این موتر که در گرفت اینجا زاوی همون رو وقت شناسر استاد بود، اینجا زمیر استاد بود. وایسر هم از بالا هم تو دویده می آمد پایین که باش سعی کنم چی گپ شد اینجا. آمد اینجا قسمت که رسید دورم چلا گرفت. بازی مامایی که بود در اینجا استاد بود که موتر که پشت سر آمده بود گفته بود باز. همین که باز گفته بود بم خورده بود. و دیگه اشتکا کلش دارم داخل موتر بود که اونو توتا شدم کلش. انجینر زمره احمدی است مامایم. این خانم مایکن بری خانم سفیر امریکا نمیفهم که شاید دینی باشه و این هم شاید رئیسشان باشه، رئیسشان کال امریکاست. این عکس دمو خود چی گرفته؟ خود دمو مؤسسه که خودش کار میکرد. به نظرم خیلی وقت میشست از این شاید یک 9 سال شود.
The drone strike was later called a tragic mistake. Ahmadi, in fact, worked for Nutrition and Education International, an American NGO that supported Afghanistan's poor.
ویره کلش اینمی خدا بیامرز مامای انجینر زمره احمدی ایره جور کرده بودی خانه را صرف و خاطر از همین جور کرده بود که بشینی قیلون بزنی و خواندن چیزا کنی. همیشه هوای جمعه که خاطر ساعت کلگی تیر شد. کلگی را پیش خود جمع میکرد و خیلی یک محبت خاص با کلگی داشت که همگی را جمع میکرد میآورد اینجا. اینمی فامیلای ما را شبی بود که خیلی جالب هم بود به ما. یک چند دقیقه خواندن کردیم. بعد از او اینمی مامای میگم چیز میگفت ریشخندی میکردیم و خیلی شب جالب به ما میشود که خیلی خنده کردیم. ما هر دفعه یاد مامی هایی بخیر دیگه جگر ما رو خون میکنه. ابرقدرت جهان است. ما خو یک چی بودیم که هیچ کاری به دست ما افغان هیچ کاری کرده نمیتونست. خیلی یک کار اشتباه کرد چون مردم دیگر را خدا کشته باشه و دیگه ما را هم زدیم تخریب کرد. طبعا دیگه امریکاست خو کار امریکا کرده خو امریکا باید.
The Pentagon has promised to pay compensation and relocate the relatives of the victims to the US. Nevertheless, this broken family's trauma is difficult to heal. During America's 20-year occupation, remote areas of Afghanistan were hit by more severe and more frequent US drone strikes than Kabul. The mountainous terrain of the Tangi Valley in Ladakh province some 100 kilometers southwest of Kabul, saw some of the most intense fighting of the Afghan war.
یا و د سال پروګرام لري چې جوړ کړي
او چې پیسې ولې
کنهشته واسه
نشته
موږ خو بیا پاشر جوړ شولو
نه پاشر مثلا
دا دروازه خو به شي باینات کړه
او سایه چې پیسې پایو شو کومکنه فرص
سایه د پیسې نه وین بیا یو څه عمر بعد راکې چا کومک وکړو خو
55-year-old Mohammed Nabi is a building contractor who lives in this valley. Today, he has been called to a nearby village to see whether a house that was hit by a drone strike several years ago can be repaired. For Tangi Valley residents, drones have long been their worst nightmare. Practically every village has had houses destroyed by drone strikes.
جنگونه څنګه و پای شو په یادونه پاتې دي لرګي پاتې جوړول شو خو دا خو معلومه ده چار کور یو شهید یو زخ دوا او درې یو زخمی ورکړي په دوه کلی کې ولدا د خاطوال کلای وو په پوسټي وکنه په پوسټو به چمله کې دا ټول مشکلات دا ټول مشکلات کلی کله مو ته معلوم دي خو ما څنګه راغه او چې لیزردار فایر وکړو غو به توان نو ته ډیر مرته دلاندې دا کلای ونیو فلا دوا زمانه دي شهیدان فل راخزم لوره امدوری خو د پیژاندو کنه ورزشکار بیخي والا کای موږ غږ دا غوی ذاتی چې یاد کو جړام رتی
For Mohammed Nabi, the war's biggest tragedy is the death of his two sons and his 5-year-old granddaughter, who were killed during a night raid by the US military 3 years ago. This is the cemetery where his two sons are buried. Mohammed Nabi often comes alone to mourn. Many of the dead in this cemetery are civilians who were killed during the war.
دا سپین بیرغونه نږدې د ټول د شهیدانو دي هغه ډرم چې وشتله کورنۍ او هغه کابر د غواخې چیرې ټولې کې دا د کریم شهید کریم کابر دی دا د تل غازی قهرمان عباسین کابر دی اسراچای چې باد کړو بیا تل اسکا او ته وړای غواخې د سرساکیخ وي غواخې وشتله هغه بیا خخ کړي دي ټول یو ځای کته دی غواخې ځای نه معلوم کړي دای دو ادوی تو شاکه پاتې وی چې دا به زه د وینې تیسه کم جوړې به کوم البته په کور کې شته دی وی به وینې و مرمایم خوړلې نو دا ایدو د یاد هغه کیسه ونه اوس نو دا افتخار خو بیا هم زړه طاقت نکو چې کاش کې دی په د پیروزۍ کې ژوندي وای
The youngest son of Mohammed Nabi became a Taliban soldier following an abusive interrogation by the former government's intelligence agency. During the night raid 3 years ago, he refused to be captured and took the lead in firing back. The US military and Afghan troops who were searching for him attacked with drones, helicopters and ground forces at the same time.
چراغ لما چې ټول کور بمبار دی چې ورغلم هغه دا غوینه کلکای به باندم که د کوټه چې بمبار هغه کړی دا روسي و روسي لاره خوته د ډیرم مرمۍ دا چې جوړه پاتې شوې ده
When the missile comes off the rail, it hits the speed of sound 1.5 seconds after, and then it loses kinetic energy as it falls towards the target. So the sound wave hits the target about 4 seconds before missile impact. The missile goes, and the guy hears it, and then runs forward, and the missile strikes.
Brandon was not involved in any of the drone strikes featured in this documentary, but the psychological pressure he experienced during his missions was shared by other drone pilots. They can never be 100% certain about the identities of the targets on their screens.
All I could feel was disgust. I watched the missile impact 2 people, so there was 3 individuals on a dirt road, and they were carrying something that looked like sticks like this over their shoulder and walking with them. So they tell me to place the crosshairs between the first 2 people. And because, I mean, they might as well just get 2 and the third person can tell everyone that their friends died. Afterwards, in the debrief, they're celebrating it. They're laughing, they're joking, they're high-fiving each other, telling me that we're winning the war on terror, all sorts of propaganda nonsense.
یه ور اعصاب خراب شد زین تا ما رو خیجه در کابل چی ونیو یارم او چی دریشی و ولی بیت پانچه می تملاک یا لاکاش می وار که دا کس پیسریخ موترسکیل بایراخ ببلا دا خدای واقع چی ورد کوټه څنګه د پل په سر د مو په زړه رحم واچوي کني مو تصمیم دا وو او ذاتینه ټول دی یاد واتل کابل لاړم هغه ته مې مو ورازه او دا ټول نبی کما دا بایرغونه ذاتی بیا نه ایران تصمیم بدل که من دایی ورمان پاته ده یا موزه خدای بنده پا واسطه که نشه چه خورما با وقت دلت جماعت بوارک
This is Prince Charles Cinema, one of the most famous theatres in London's West End. Today, May the 19th, 2022, crowds are lining up for the world premiere of Immoral Code, a documentary that addresses the ethical debate over artificial intelligence weapons.
I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to say no.
That's a hard one.
After the screening, experts from the fields of artificial intelligence, law and media from all over the world took part in a discussion.
Was that governments recognize that maybe they don't need to do the amassing, or at least not publicly, which is what the NSA and other intelligence agencies were doing post that era, but they've been going to the private sector, getting all this sensor data that the other panelists are talking about, getting the private sector to build the systems with their expertise, and then their hands are clean in many regards.
Accordingly, how much we should be really focusing, yes, on regulation and the law and government, but also potentially on educating individuals, educating, citizens like those who were featured in the film.
Basically, where people who had lost families, family members or property could, apply to get a paltry few dollars, basically. And this was all covered up, and no one has been held responsible. Nobody has been held responsible for this because these are unmanned systems. And now we want to take it even further, where we're not going to be saying, oh, well, a person made a mistake. It's going to be, well, the machine made the mistake.
Among the guests is Laura Nolan, a former website reliability engineer at Google Ireland.
Tech companies are purely driven by profit. They will do whatever they think is most profitable for them, and they do not care about your AI principles or anything like that. I am a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for about 20 years. I'm also known as a campaigner against autonomous weapons systems, and this is, very connected to my work. I worked on infrastructure at Google, infrastructure and reliability.
According to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, drone strikes killed between 300 and 909 Afghan civilians in the 5 years between January 2015 to January 2020. Instead of re-examining its own drone strike policy, the US government has instead increased its investment in research and, through cooperation with tech giants, plans to more effectively use drones to obtain data and improve the strike capability of autonomous weapons. Project Maven is one of the most controversial of such cooperation projects.
Project Maven is a US military project. So the idea of Maven, basically the problem that the US military had was it had too much high-resolution drone video footage. This is called wide area motion imagery. And so they couldn't hire enough human analysts to actually watch all this footage and pick out what they're interested in. The idea was to build machine learning software that could take in this wide area motion imagery video and pick out, like I say, people and vehicles and potentially other objects of interest. There were certainly no internal announcements or anything like that that there was this military project happening. The first time I heard the words Project Maven, I asked what that was, and I was told that it was machine learning analysis of military drone footage. My initial reaction was that I didn't want to work on that or anything related to that, because I feel like it's a misguided approach to tackling the problems that the US military were having in the Greater Middle East.
Google's involvement with Project Maven was a secret until late 2017, when Google employees exposed the matter on the company's internal communication platform. More than 3,000 employees signed a petition asking Google to cancel the project's contract. Dozens of employees, Laura Nolan among them, resigned in protest.
Maven was absolutely not an autonomous weapon, but Maven was, I guess, the foundations for building autonomous weapons, or at the very least, software recommendation systems for targeting. I don't think that a militarized response to terrorism is actually effective strategically. I think it does a huge amount of collateral damage to civilians, so I can't support it.
After 2 months of resistance from a large number of employees, Google in 2018 gave up research and development in the field of military AI, which could have generated more than $100 million a year in revenue.
Beyond the Afghan theater, we only target Al-Qaeda and its associated forces. And even then, the use of drones is heavily constrained. America does not take strikes to punish individuals. We act against terrorists who pose a continuing and imminent threat to the American people. And before any strike is taken, there must be near certainty that no civilians will be killed or injured, the highest standard we can set.
Barack Obama hoped to use drones to fight America's enemies in, quote, a just war. The result was that more and more Afghan citizens lived in constant fear. On August 3rd, 2014, Mohammed Nassim and his cousin were working in the fields when they were hit by an unexplained US military drone strike. The attack cost Nassim his left leg, and he witnessed the death of his cousin.
بیا به تو مدر چای بل چاب در سرولای دال بگازر و کوگی وینه دا پاتان دی او وایدا سلاختای دی کنه او پیز سنزلین دی وینه عقب بیا سنزل کو عقب مخروپه شو اپه سید سونه به چود ولا کنه سامان کرد خطا خو
څای ریش است نو به داسې ورش ځه لای شي په اوره کې چې ونه لوي خو وینه بیا خو پسرلی چې دا لروش په دې پاټوی کې به اوره نه وي سنو به گازر او کچالو غنم دا شان کې کویرو کنه ځای شوله په سمه فرصه سعید امان موږ دلې یوه بجه وه کور کې مو غنم راوړي وو دا موږ ترېشل کړو دا کاپ وار وشوله په موږ د ډرون پای را باندې وشوی دغه خو نه د غږ داسې په زوره راغلل نو چې غږ په زوره راغله ده ته ما ویل ما ډرون پای په موږ باندې د ترپ کوله ټې منډه وکړه نو چې داسې یو څلور پنځه قدمه موږ تللو ولګېدلو او دا چې ولټېده دغلې ولګېدله دا یې بیا داسې یو 100 متره خته ورکړی وه ختم وه په دې وخت کې شهید وه دا خو هغه دومره وخت هم دلې ډېر وخت ووتله که ما ته راغلم او ما پورته که زه نه شوی پورته کولی د پښه خو مې کټ وه نور مې وجود 315 پارچې د جراب له ډېرې زړې شوي نه نور یې پاک سات انجینر صاحب ژوبلې نه راسره خو د جراب لم چې زړې شي په دغه کې مې لږ ژوبلې دغه زخمونه دي نور په وجود کې مې هم زخمونه ډېر شته وینې دغه زخمونه دغه پارچې دي که د تورې تورې د بله مې وینې دغه ده دا زخمونه دي دا ټول زخمونه دي دا پونده مې ده پونده مې وله دا پوکې مې زخم شته ملمي هم شته ده خو اوس ماشینه نشته دي د 3-4 میاشتې م کېږي اقتصادي حالت موږ د کار مثال داسې کار نه شي کوي چې موږ بیل واخلو یا کلنګ واخلو
Mohammed Nasim, who has always worked as a village teacher, claims that he and his cousin have never had any contact with terrorist organizations. He still cannot understand why he and his cousin were targeted during the US drone strike. The US military has so far not given him a clear explanation.
موږ یې څه کوونکې دا فکر وکړو که نه کنې موږ داسې جرم هم شی هم نه و کړي خو په موږ یې دا برید وکړل او د پای یې راباندې وکړله نه سلا وه راسره نو موږ هم نه پوهېدو چې موږ یې څنګه یې وویشتله موږ ګناه څه وه موږ یې ولې وویشتلو موږ هم دغه ځای ته مایوس وو موږ که کله یو خدای پاک یو واس راکړه یا یو پوښتنه کېده موږ پوښتنه ترې وکړو چې موږ څه جرم کړی وه ولې مو وویشتلي چې دی وایي چې په رسنیو کې په میډیاوو کې دی وایي چې موږ بشردوست یو دی کله بشردوست دی عام خلک ویلي جنګ خو د وطن وراني ده که نه خو موږ خو دی وطن ته نه و راغلي دی راغلي وو دی وی چې موږ بشردوست یو دی کله بشردوست دی که نه دا لې بېګرده شپه چاپې وایلې د کور نه وباسه عام خلک وله
احساس ته چی دی مثال چې آیا هغه وخت کې چې ولګېد یا اوس چې مثال دغه عسکر باید تا پیدا کړی د امریکایي عسکر انتقام دې ترې اخیستی وای څه نظر څه فکر
We presented Mohammed Nasim's questions to Brandon, the former US drone pilot. It was a long-distance conversation about painful memories.
د موږ دا نظر و موږ چې انشاءالله انتقام خدای ناتمی خستل کېده مجاهدینو ته خستله که نه خو موږ دا نظر و چې موږ څه ولې دونه ظلم کېږي موږ خو نه چا ملک ته ورغلي یو نه د چا کور ته ورغلي یو په خپل کور کې هم خلک نه پرېږدي موږ دا ډېر خفه وو په زړه کې د الله نه م ګیله وه چې موږ ولې داسې کوي په دغه افغانانو ولې دومره ظلمونه کوي په دغه مسلمانانو چې موږ باندې دومره ظلمونه کوي چې خپل کور کې هم نه پرېږدي
Honestly, I understand how this man feels. I'm not going to say that I don't deserve his hatred because I was a part of it, you know. And I think that those people that are devastated by war and conflict on both sides need to come together in peace, purposefully. I don't know if my prayers are ever heard, but I will pray for these people. And I hope that they pray for me. I met this lady once whose brother and husband were killed in a drone strike, and she asked me, why did they have to die? And I couldn't give her an answer, and we just cried together. All I could just feel is this no longer hate towards these people that are supposedly my enemy, but now I have hate towards myself. Those things, those moments, they stick with you, right? It's like burned, like branded right into your memory. I know what I did was wrong. Everyone's telling me, thank you for your service, you know, but who did I really serve? I served greed and corporations, not the people of America. I served, you know, political aspirations, not higher consciousness, justice, ideals, those types of things.
In order to bring normalcy back to his daily life, Mohammed Nassim needs to regularly visit the International Rehabilitation Center of the Red Cross in Kabul for prosthetic maintenance and rehabilitation.
چې راحت ورسره نه وي یعنی ځای د ځورېدو بیا خوږېدو ورته وایي که نه دا مشکل دی بېرته درته جوړ یوه ګنټې داسې یوه ساعته دلته به ګرځه کته وپورته پنځلو په پروګرام کته وپورته واخله سمه
ده Dr. Shukrullah Zerak, a landmine victim himself, has worked for many years at the International Center of the Red Cross and has seen countless ordinary people who have lost limbs due to war.
So if we note that indirect war victim also should be counted as a war victim, almost a high percentage of our clients are war victims.
The International Center of the Red Cross Rehabilitation Center was established in Kabul in 1988. In the past 33 years, 6 more rehabilitation centers have been opened in various parts of Afghanistan to provide care for people with physical disabilities. A large proportion of Afghan civilians became disabled during the war due to airstrikes and landmines.
زخم دارم. او زخم بستر شده.
برای شفاخانه علی آقا.
این دیگه کار زخمش مربوط شفاخانه میشه.
شفاخانه علی آقا کجا ما افتیم کسی نیستی تو اون ارتباط داره حساب خواهد.
نی والا امروز شفاخانه ما ارتباط چیزی نداریم. فقط اون همه مریضا را باید بپذیرن بگیرن. اگه ببریم چی میگن براتون؟ زخم بستر احتیاط کنیم که خطرناک از زخم بستر احتیاط نکردیم که تو شده. با من خدا. At the beginning, our main customer was war-wounded ICRC mandate. Then, of course, there was many other disabled not directly related to war, but they were in need of assistance. We tried always to help everybody. Doesn't matter for us who they are and from belongs to who, which party, which government or anti-government. In all these 7 centers, we have 2 main activities, which are physical rehabilitation and social integration of disabled in society. Under umbrella of the physical rehabilitation, we make artificial limbs, prostheses, braces, dysorthosis for people. Every year, 18,000 devices we produce and we distribute through all these 7 centers. which are 5,000 artificial limbs and 13,000 approximately the orthoses or the braces. This war, I think, one of the very, very, very long war in the world. The very bad effect is that why a child lose his limb because of war, that two parties fight among themselves and the other people suffer. This is the things that it hurt not only me, every single disabled. The civilian population is much higher than the military, that they suffer and they lost many people their limb, legs or hands, or anyhow they lost their life.
Long-range killings by drones are not unique to Afghanistan. Civilian casualties caused by drone strikes happen continuously in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, and other regions. This is the London headquarters of Air Wars, an independent investigative agency that tracks, monitors, verifies, and assesses the global use of drones by the US military and the resulting civilian casualties.
We essentially started monitoring the actions of the US-led coalition in the fight against ISIS. So we have researchers who are local to the conflicts that we monitor, and they're continuously scouring social media, local media, open source information to find an allegation of civilian harm. Then our geolocation team review all of that material and try and provide, as close as possible, a coordinate for that event. The geolocation is a very key bit that happens at the end and kind of enables us to orient each civilian harm assessment to as precise a location as possible. In 2021, what we were looking at really was civilian casualties as they were occurring based on kind of changes in the global environment. So a massive downturn in US strikes. I mean, for us, it's problematic in the same way, unless civilians know or have acknowledgement about the fatalities that were caused by military action, they can't even begin the process of either getting compensation or having any kind of restitution as a result of the action. Last week, states have finally agreed to sign on to something called the Political Declaration on the Use of Explosive Weapons in Populated Areas. And I would say the social impact has been limited. Something like civilian casualties isn't often understood or used, and that's because governments themselves are not always transparent with the public about their own military actions. And that's something that we're really trying to focus on and raise awareness of. Militaries themselves have to be the ones who are responsible for their own actions, and they have to be able to report kind of back on that, and to societies, especially people in the states who are kind of paying the taxes that fund these wars, to say these are the number of people that we're killing.
After 20 years of continuous war, Afghanistan is devastated and its people suffer from poverty, but life must go on. For Afghan civilians who have been left permanently disabled due to the war, recovery and rebirth is often a long and difficult process.
Okay. This شما است؟
دست شما است.
نامکش؟
نامش فرشید.
فرشید جان چطور هستی؟ 3 سال پیش من اینجا دارم؟
3-4 سال شده پرسید.
کجا؟
لوگر.
این تنگ شده؟
این تنگ شده.
جای شوگار میکنه؟ بکش آفرین شما بکش نمیشه اینو زود بوشین که دانه میگیره خب سایش زود بوشین خود کدسته جوله کرده از پیش احتیاط کنید خب ببینید جوله کرده احتیاط کنید حال برات میاره دیگر کار در ذکر کلان میباشه آزاد میباشه ان شاء الله زود بوشین هر شو مکتبت تمام زندگیت نرمال پیش بر کالایت خودت بپوش خودت بکش خود کارایت انجام بده اساس مستقل شونی محتاج به کسی نباشی فقط کوشش که پدر مادر تو رو مکتب روان کنه قلم کتابچیتم کوشش میکنی ما بر کمک شیم صحیح آفرین بچه در سپاره حفظ کنی و در مکتب نابنایانم پدر تبو شاملت کنه اوکی وعده است قول بده
Over the past 10 plus years, Dr. Zirak has lost count of how many children he has treated who, like Rashid, have a physical handicap. In his experience, their psychological recovery is always more difficult than their physical recovery. When talking to people who have lost hope in life, Dr. Zirak often uses his own experience to inspire them.
I lost my leg with mine explosion. Exactly 14. And now I'm able to walk. I'm a physiotherapist, professional. I'm responsible of this department. I got married with my love. I have a beautiful house, a car, a professional. I did my university, I did my school. All after this, most of our staff here they have experienced their own stories with disabilities. And it's very easy for them to speak with the patients, to give him examples.
This corner of the Red Cross Rehabilitation Centre is what Dr. Zirak is most proud of. Every Friday afternoon, he comes here to chat with old friends.
آجیسا سلام. تیم تشکرنا که تیم چندم است؟ سیوم است امروز؟ تیم سیوم. چند نفر داره تیم سیوم؟
تیم سیوم مجموعاً 12 13 نفر میاد 4
امروز پلان کدام تکنیک است که برای تیم چی کارا بکنید؟
امروز پلان از این دارم که برشون یک پیک کار کنم پیک فردی کار کنم سر
دفاع فردی
را بیشتر پیدا کنم دریبل خوب کار کنم که چیز برن باید کار کنن زگزال برن چون به خاطر کشیدن یا چون کسایی که آمده تیم سه دو تیم یک وقت مدتش کمتر بودنی تعداد
Dr. Zirak leads the wheelchair basketball team representing Afghanistan in international competitions. These physically disabled players have built their motivation and courage to continue living through sports.
Sport itself is inspiring for all human beings, especially for disabled. Disabled do not have many choice to do many sports, especially in Afghanistan. So the wheelchair basketball, even though it's an expensive game, expensive sport, but it's a good choice for people with disabilities, with the lower limb disabilities to do many sport activities. It helps for their mental and their mental status, for their physical status, and for a social integration status.
On the other side of the world, more and more whistleblowers like Brandon are speaking out about the true nature of the war and seeking redemption in the process.
You know, you can't have courage without fear. And I don't have any fear of the consequences because the truth is greater. Ended up being labeled a whistleblower, and I got the International Whistleblowing Award. I mean, they honored me. And in fact, I remember before getting up on stage to give the talk, I had written in my notebook that I was like, I can't take this. I'm just a soldier who did bad things. I'm sorry. I can't be who you thought that I was. But it was interesting, right before I got on stage, there was this young man who came up to me and he told me that he wrote a rap song about me, and he rapped it to me. And I just felt so honored that someone could do that.
I wanted to be a hero growing up. I wanted to do something good with my life and benefit people.
And so I closed my book. I don't remember that speech, but I did speak it from my heart, just like I always do. I had nothing but my own experiences and my own sorrow, and that's the only thing that I could share with people. The fact that people still honor me 10 years later, you know, it's very humbling. I love it. It doesn't make me feel alone, and I felt alone for so long.
After suffering 20 years of war, the withdrawal of US troops has put an end to Afghans' fears of drones.
This is a critical point.
But the wounds left by the war still need more time and effort to slowly heal.